Hello, guys. In this session, we are going to cover the research talks. So once you start to do your own research, and now you write a paper, and the paper has been accepted to the conference or journals, now is the time to present your work to other people. And usually we call this research talks or research presentations. Um, there are many different kinds of talks, including lectures. Lectures can be one type of talk, but here research talks are slightly different. It's official, and it's like the officially, uh, you know, this is the chance um, to present your work to the audience. Most of the audience are professionals, uh, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have the sufficient background, because even though we all have computer science researchers, but there are, plenty of different fields in computer science as well. So it's typical to assume that the audience might not have sufficient background knowledge. So you should consider the research talks. Um, so the first thing that you have to consider is to know your audience. Without knowing audience, it's kind of hard to um, prepare your presentation and presentation slides. And the second one is you should organize and focus, right? And then you should consider both talk structure and talk style. And for the important things, you should repeat your points. You should emphasize your points. And another important thing, last but not least, is the meant to manage time. And lastly, you should practice and practice, because practice makes perfect. Some of the slides here, I borrowed the slides from Professor Tanner's class, so I included the courtesy here. So what is the research talk? Again, this is known as research presentations. This can be regarded as a brief lecture about a particular piece of research. Most of the time, this research topic is done by you if you are the first author of a paper, right? And this is an opportunity to officially discuss your work with peers. The intent of a research talk is openly, so educate is not a good term here, openly inform ideas, your observations or your discoveries to the audience. So the objective of research talks is to convey mostly an impression, philosophy, or strategy, ideas, approaches, rather than educating the audience. And most of the research talks, I think I have to say every research talk has a fixed duration. So, for example, a short talk is like as long as 10 minutes. Slightly longer and longer, you may have different kind of research talk durations, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 or 60 minutes. Usually this duration includes questions and answers. So, for example, if you have you are given 10 minutes, then means you should finish your presentation within 7 to 8 minutes, and you should, consider a couple of minutes for questions and answer session, right? For example, on 60 minutes, I see people prepare for 45 to 50 minutes long slides, and other than that, 10 minutes Q&A is expected. For academia talk, I think 15 to 20 minutes are really typical if you have to demonstrate your work in the conference or not journal, conference talk, then it's likely that you will be given as long as 15 to 20 minutes, including Q&A. Okay, so let's do the first thing first. So the most important thing is to know your audience. You need to clearly identify the audience depth of knowledge, because you need to show a fundamental understanding of engineering to whoever is giving the grades. I think so. Whoever gets the credit, and so most of the audience would be probably scientists, researchers, not the business managers or investors. So I would say it's not a good idea, to advertise your, work. I mean, in order to make money, for example, because the audience are not investors. But sometimes, the audience interest, it might be, money. For example, investors. And also, it would be good to entertain the audience, because everyone likes to be entertained. So how do we convey our talk with entertainment? Well, we'll see in the next slides. And another thing you should consider about your audience is that what they want to hear, right? Are they venture investors? Then they are probably interested in making money. For example, the research managers, then neighbor research managers, this is just example. Maybe they are interested in how you're gonna improve their ships capability to communicate. This could be different depending on the audience. Maybe you are, a student under the capstone design project, but here mostly we are focusing on the research presentation. Then, as a student, so you can demonstrate your design will work, that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so capstone design project is also can be part of it's not a scientific the presentation, but as part of I would say the this could be also technical presentation. So you should also consider the audience. In this case, the audience would be students. Next thing you should consider is to organize and focus on what you want to say. Typically, if the talk is long, and it's easy to lose the audience. So in this case, let's say 60 minutes, 45 minutes talk, it's likely that audience might lose your, their attention. So in this case, you should briefly mention in the first, a few slides, you should talk about how you organize your story, maybe with a table of contents. I'm going to talk about blah, 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 the specific topic in this order. And mostly in the talk, it's better to avoid lengthy equations, particularly not just the mathematical equations, other former equations like a proof. It's good. Sometimes it might be helpful, but it's likely that the audience might not be concentrated on those mathematical equations because it requires some time to understand, right? So in a typical computer science talk, it's better to avoid lengthy mathematical equations or any former proof or former equations. But as you know, in most courses, lectures, it would be unavoidable. But the purpose of the course lecture is different from the research talks. And I think I'm going to talk about this one later on again. Use a picture, which is worth 1,000 words, right? Figure is good. And also prepare an example to explain a complex concept. We'll get to that later on. Also, it would be nice to remind the audience of important points. So you can start with an overview. I'm going to talk about this thing, the whole overview. And now, let's say if there is a step, then I'm going to talk about the whole story one by one at each step, following the step. Or if the system itself is pretty complex and this system consists of 3 different components, then let me start with component 1 and then going to the component 2 and then going to the last component. And maybe we have to explain the part of the first components in detail if needed. But I would recommend you avoid too many technical details in a single shot because the audience might not follow what you're talking about. Because not every audience have sufficient background knowledge. Okay, and in case that detailed technical figures are unavoidable, then you should be able to explain each component one by one. Now we are working on here, now I'm explaining on here, then I'm going to explain this part, right? Also, in case of sort of complicated concept or complex consistent design, then you need to emphasize important details visually. So visual representation is pretty important. So this is slightly close to the paper, right? So paper also requires visual representations to make the readers better understand those, right? And if required, you need to use an animation. We'll get to that later on as well in the slide. So you can make an object appear and disappear, with the animation if required. Okay, and then you should provide a talk outline. So the most important thing is to draw a big picture of your talk. And that way you can outline your talk and the audience can get the big picture of the objective of your work. And one of the good ways to do is to organize your story in a top-down manner. So here, top-down means you should demonstrate the overview of your maybe system or approach, and then you look into, one by one component or one step by step, right? So in a nutshell, I would say important ideas are presented the first, and then details second, and then conclusions last. Otherwise, it's easy to get lost. So how can we keep providing talk outlines? Here are several tips. You can redisplay the talk outline for each topic. So for example, this is the whole architecture. And suppose that we have 4 different steps. And then before, you start with the overview of your system. Now I'm going to talk about this. And then you start to explain the details of the first step or the first components. And the second time, you have several slides here. And the second time, you show this overview again, now highlighting the second part. Then now your audience keep following you. They could catch up with you. Like, okay, now the first components, the first step is over. Now I'm here in the second step, okay? So this is how to highlight the present topic. So this is the present topic, and maybe the next, the third component or steps, so that you can remind the audience of the organization of the talk, okay? Now let's consider the whole talk structure. So usually, I did not include here, but usually the first one is the first page here represents the title of your talk, right? So usually I'm going to talk about this title, blah, blah, blah. And this is a joint work with, this person and this person from a specific organization. And then you move on to the introduction. So introduction usually starts with a large concept or the explaining the current status and defining a problem. And as we did in the paper, so the motivation is important. Why is this important? Why is this topic important, or why is this topic motivating the others, and why is this interesting, right? Now the audience got motivated, and then they know the problem, the definition of a problem. Then you can provide an outline of the talk. So I'm going to talk about this specific program, the problem in this way. And as I said in the previous slides, this can be redisplayed to show the topic progression. And if you think the audience might not have sufficient background knowledge, then you can include the background material if needed. But if you think they have sufficient knowledge, then you may skip the background material here. But it'll be good to review, the background material if you have enough time, just a minute or so. Now it's time to introduce your key ideas and approaches. Now you summarize them, and you should explain why is your idea, your approach better than the state-of-the-art idea and approach. This is pretty close to what we did in the paper, in writing paper, right? And examples are helpful practice, and you should demonstrate your experiments and empirical outcomes to support your ideas. So this is also important, and people will acknowledge that, okay, this is a good work, and the idea looks working based on the empirical results. Okay, and now you can wrap up with discussion and conclusion. So usually discussion section contains, briefly you can mention what are remaining things, what are the part of the future work, and what are the limitation of this work, okay? And after that, the Q&A section. So this is pretty much a typical talk structure, and depending on the duration of the talk, let's say 20 minutes, 40 minutes, and you can divide the minutes depending on the whole duration. All right, let's move on the talk style. So here you can see here the slides. There's slides. You can, as the speaker, you should make some eye contact with people, with audience in different parts of the room. And try to face the audience, not just the screen or computer itself. Otherwise, people may not follow what you're, the core idea of your topic. And it's okay to stop for a second and refer to your notes if you think you need it. But you should not read the slides or slide notes off the computer. So I think a lot of students are making this kind of mistakes by just reading the slides. So I'm not blaming this guy, but if the slides has tons of text like this, then it's likely that as the speaker, once you start to reading the text in the slides, it's likely that many the audience might lose the interest. Okay, so let me get to this later on how to construct the slides later on, but too many text should be avoidable. Too many text should be avoided because it's really hard to follow the text, and reading text requires a lot of actually a lot of work. You read the text and think about text, and the text is not readable, or is not interpretable, or some text, a part of text that is not understandable, then again the audience start to lose your point. Okay, so in essence, you should talk to the audience, not talking to the computer, right? So you should face the audience, not the screen or computer. And you can leave some notes, but you should not just read those notes. Well, dress code. This is also one of the talk style. It totally depends on setting. So for the conference talk, it can range from just shorts or t-shirts to suits. A course presentation is also similar, but usually dress code, you should find out ahead of time what is the prevailing dress code. Also, you can, do the minimum. Business casual is one of the most acceptable dress code, so you should consider the business casual. If you are presenting a proposal to the investor, for example, then usually you should wear suits, at a minimum blazer with tie. Humor is really, if you can use humor in your talk, that would be great, particularly the invited talks or lectures, also the research talks, because the humor is good, and if they are laughing, then people tend to pay attention and they don't get mostly fall asleep, right? So for example, here for stages of the lecture, at first they are, trying to concentrate on the class and started to lose the interest, and now they, started to fall asleep. But you should be very careful when you use humor, particularly in case of proposal talks. This is mostly when you give a talk, to the investors. So should be careful. And if you utilize the humor, then you should avoid inappropriate jokes, because they make, the whole presentation very awkward. And repeat your points. Repeat your points. And there is a very simple rule. Okay, you can tell your audience 3 times if you want to make an emphasis of on your points. First, tell them what you're going to say. Second, say it. Third, summarize what you said. Okay, so very simple. I'm going to talk about this thing, and this thing is about this thing. This thing is about blah blah blah, and then to summarize, that's why I talked blah blah blah. So for example, here, the speaker wants to say the algorithm A is better than B and C. So having a figure, the speaker says, this graph shows how algorithm A performs better than algorithm B and C as the number of nodes increases, for example. This is what, the entry point. And then now we have the figure, if the speaker begins to elaborate on how this works. Look, the x-axis is the number of nodes, and y-axis represents execution time in seconds. Now the red curve shows the execution time of A as number of the nodes increases, right? So with the audience, the speaker attempts to interpret the plot, the graph, for example, here. And then finally, you can summarize what you mentioned. Hence, you can see that as the number of nodes increases above n, algorithm A performs better. This is because blah, blah, blah. Now, people focus on a specific approach, which is algorithm A in this case. Then by looking at the figure, now they understand why the algorithm A is better than algorithm B and C, right? Because blah, blah, blah. Another thing is managing time. And this is the first rule of presentations. You should be aware of how much time you have first. So this is very, very important, as well as the knowing the audience. So when you give a talk, first thing you should know is who is the audience and how much time uh, do I have? That's the uh, you know the first thing that you should be prepared. And if the presentation is too long, that may bother the audience, especially if it's long and boring. Okay. And also, you should keep a watch or clock easily visible. So before you're giving a presentation, it would be good to know the location of the clock. Or you may have some time counter with your smartphone, for example. And sometimes when even though you are well prepared, sometimes because of interrupted questions or unexpected things, maybe the presentation equipment is not working properly, and then you may lose some time to repair. I mean, to get the presenter back. Then sometimes you may uh, have to prepare, uh, you know, those, unexpected incidents. In this case, it's good to know the slides to be skipped when running out of time. So, for example, you have 40 minutes talk given, but because of some problems, then the talk has been shortened to 30 minutes. Then, now you do not have enough time, then you can skip some of the slides, right? Maybe you can skip implementation details. Instead, you may focus on, very interesting, very important points alone, right? Uh, just showing the results may impress people. So this is totally depending on your strategy for managing time. So to make your talk successful, this practice is the key, right? So the best way for a seamless presentation is again practice. So every single time when you practice your talk, you should practice it as if you're doing the actual presentation, okay? And you can do the actual presentation as a practice. Also, you can catch places where you may not be expressing the material clearly enough, right? You should recognize, okay, this is the place that I do not understand well. This is the place I do not convey my idea well, right? So it would be good to use the notes feature, probably in your PowerPoint slides, PowerPoint application. This will assist you in remembering what to mention, okay? And once almost everything is ready, then now it's time to rehearse a dry run with your advisor or maybe your candidate audiences. And you should practice again and again enough times so that it's very natural. And you should know what the next slide so that you can transition very naturally. Okay. After 5-6 times of practice, now you now almost remember what to say, what to say next, right? And then you can clearly convey your idea and you can imagine what's the next slide. It looks like a very smooth, it looks like a very seamless presentation. And you may jot down the notes of suggestions from the audience, I mean, candidate audience, and the talk, I mean, in your practice talk for improvements. Maybe the audience can give you some feedback saying, okay, this part is too fast, or this part was unclear, or some parts requires more visual representation, or some slides are too complex to follow, something like that. So they could give some feedback for, enhancements. You should reflect those suggestions, and then you should repair your slides. And finally, after the talk, the following one is the question and answer, right? And it would be nice to prepare the expected questions to answer. Also, your candidate audience may give you some future questions that might be asked by the real audience in the talk, right? Nervousness. Almost, I would say everyone has some nervousness to fight back in their mind if they do not have many experiences to give a talk, and even though they they practice a lot, they may feel some nervousnesses. Typically, a well-organized practice talk almost always goes well. You don't need to doubt that. Okay. But still, if you feel nervous, then right before you give a talk, taking a deep breath will calm you down. So will be very, very, very helpful. And another thing, this is something that I usually do. Is to slow down. So it's a very typical for the speakers, particularly student speakers. They tend to speak very fast. So slow down is very important. If you try to speak what you want to say too fast, it's likely that you might lose the pace. Then you don't know what to say. You might not know what to say the next time. So in this case, you just slow down. You do pause for a second between the points or between the slides. This pausing is very helpful. And you are pausing a few seconds, but the audience may not recognize those pause. It's just the pause for you. And also take a few seconds about the question before answering the question. So, I've seen quite a few students or quite a few speakers to get very perplexed, I would say, or very embarrassed because the question was was not expected, or the question that the speaker were not, thinking of, or it's too tough questions, it's too hard question to answer. And in that case, it's okay to say, I don't know, I have no idea about that. But it would be better to say, okay, that is a good point. I haven't thought about it, but one possible approach would be blah, blah, blah. So that would be a better answer against the tricky or tough question. Sometimes it's helpful to bring notes, right? When you are afraid of forgetting a point between slides, then having some notes will be fruitful. And also, you may write down the key phrases to remember, right? That would be helpful as well. So nervousness is something that almost everyone feels when they give a talk or give a presentation. So you're not alone here. So please do, some tricks like taking a deep breath or speak slow, right? Or you can bring some notes. Okay, but still, I would say you can get this kind of things over with a lot of practices. Here I bring, one of the YouTube video clips. This is about how to give a great research talk by Microsoft. So this is a YouTube video, and I recommend you to watch this video. It lasts less than an hour, but it's really worth watching. The talk. The talk is by Simon. Okay, here is a brief takeaway. So you should consider who the audience is and how much time you have, right? And when you're organizing a talk, you should bring big ideas first, and then you should slightly move on to the details and then summarize them. And that's it, right? And you can bring some messages, not the whole messages, but just giving the audience an important message. That's it. Because your paper has been published, this means if there is something that the audience is not understood, then they could look for your publication and they could read your paper. And I've seen quite a few speakers intentionally, they omit several details. So this is sort of the guideline, the outline of your work to make the audience attractive. So this is very attractive work. So here's how we did. If you're interested in, then please read our paper. That's how you can convey the story. And also to make your talk or presentations, research presentations successful, the only way is to, do the repetitive practices. Okay. Right, now let's move on how to create an effective slides. So how do you design slides? This is about the slide organization. Slides are a guideline for your talk, but not a word-for-word copy. So the slides doesn't necessarily contain every word that you are going to speak. So this is just a guideline, okay? This is your helper. And you can list the specific points that you want to make as subtopic of each topic. And the very simple rule is keep it simple. This is very general rule. Keep it simple. Too much text is not good. Too complicated figure make your slides even worse. This is not the visual art, right? Instead, this is just a guideline to assist the audience to understand your story, right? So make it simple, and then a smaller text, a simple, figure would be better than just looking at the figure or plot with a simple sentence there. then it's likely that the audience focus on what you're talking about. So another thumb rule is you may expect 1 to 3 minutes per slide. Suppose that you have a 30 minutes talk, and 13 to 20 slides would be sufficient. If there are more than 20 slides, it would last more than 30 minutes. So you should also consider a 4 to 5 minutes question and answer. Then you have the 25 to 6 minutes, right? And for the questions or for the specific details, you may want to create a backup slides after that, right? A few backup slides. And here are several tips for effective slides. You should prepare slides to help you convey a message effectively. And here, effective slides do not mean a good-looking slides. It's good to have good-looking slides, but it's not the only way to convey your message. If you wonder you can waste the space, then totally fine. If there are, too much space, totally good, totally fine. That's okay. That means the audience can concentrate on, specific text or figure only. You can also use acronym or abbreviations, but you should complete the names in your talk if these acronyms are not common or abbreviations are not common. But you can use, the common terms, common acronyms like API. You don't need to talk about what the API is. Everybody knows application programming interface, right? So API or, several very common acronyms. But in most of the cases, in your research work, you may have your own acronyms that people don't use in common. Then you should complete the acronym during your talk. Again, a visual representation is worth 1,000 words. So it's very important. So you should leverage figures, graphs into conveying your message, and use a focus to point out a component. So I will talk about what this means with the following example. And you may use an animation, but you should use it very wisely. So for example, you may want to describe a complex system or complex phases with a point at a time display. So one by one, right? And then it would be helpful for the audiences to catch up with the speaker. But you should avoid the flying objects. This makes the audience more distracted. So, for example, what is the emphasis? So this is for example, this is the whole, let's say, the structure of your system, but it has too much components, too many components. So it's really hard to follow. So instead, you can enlarge some, the part with this for emphasis. So here, the speaker wants to talk about eShop mobile application, and if the Xamarin is not a common term, that you should mention what the Xamarin is about. C# and different kind of platforms, iOS, Android, Windows. So these are everything that the audience might be familiar with, right? So in this slides, the speaker wants to talk about the application, the reference application with the eShop on containers. And now he wants to focus on this field, and maybe next to this field and this field. Maybe later on, the speaker can move on, different components with a focus, right? And another thing is we can use the animation with the steps. So for example, on the left side, let's suppose that there are tons of different disassembled instructions. People don't know what this is, right? So in this case, you can just, with the animation, you can explain one by one. Okay, so look at the first line. It represents that XOR key that is stored to EAX. So now people just, the audience just focusing on the first line only. Okay, EAX, with the move instruction, some value is stored to the EAX register. Okay, good. What is the next thing? Now it actually receives the program counter, which is get PC with the FPU. So here FPU represents a floating point unit. So something like that. You can explain what is the acronym is for. And here the the following instruction regarding with FPU is FC move, right? And FC move, blah, blah, blah. And then this, because of this instruction, the FNSENB instruction stores the latest address, which is this address, right? Something like that. And then moving on, now this is the unpacking routine with the XOR loop. Now this is the repetitive counter. Okay, this EBP plus 12 is the starting point of a payload. Now, by looking at each step, it's easy for the audience to follow where you're talking about. So suppose that if you just show the whole figure at a time, then it's really difficult to follow because there are too many text and too many contents in a single slide. And another thing, suppose that we want to describe how here the original payload can be decrypted. Then there are many decoders, and so sort of pretty much complicated in this case. Also, step by step, we can show how the decoding step works. For example, here decoding begins here. Second, you get the PC. So here, program counter as the the register for the next instruction. And then third, now we have the schema decoder that decodes the decoder here. And then here, because the decoder has been obfuscated using the schema decoder, the decoder can be decoded. And decoder again decodes the encrypted payload. Now the red box has been, enciphered with a key. Now the decoder decodes this box. Now it's gone. Now you get the original payload, right? So now with the numbering, because the numbering is not in order, I insert the numbers explicitly here. And with the number and animation, even though the whole, the concept looks a little complicated, but still it's possible for the audience to follow what's going on, right? Here are another tips for effective slides. So you should always think about uncluttered, clear, visible, and readable slides. And you should not distract the audience. And for the titles like these titles, it should be informative. So for example, characteristics of study participants, which is good. Risk factors for illness. Okay, this is good. But result 1, result 2, result 3, this is bad because it doesn't, convey, it doesn't have the information. It's not informative, right? This is tips for effective text. So you may prepare each slide to help you convey a message effectively. So in this case, suppose that we have, let's say, 100 people, then it's likely that the people sitting in the back, they might not see the text clearly if the text, the font size is too small, right? So you should a readable font size even to the audience sitting in the back. This is not the absolute the points, but the size of the fonts, but this is typical size. The title is 36 points, main bullets 28 points. As the sub bullets, you can use the 24 points. Then, it's clearly visible, even to the people sitting behind, right, in the back. And avoid sub bullets. If you need sub bullets, then it's good to split the slides. Also, consistency is important, so you should keep a font size consistent across different slides. And for the number of text, 8 to 10 lines would be maximum. Otherwise, reading the text would be too destructive for people. If you read those texts, it's not a good presentation, and there's no, good reason to sit there to focus on what you're saying, right? And bullets are better mostly than numbered items in most cases. Also, try to, make the whole text or the whole sentence concise. Mostly, you do not need to complete sentences, just the keywords only, right? So here are several things to avoid, because these things make your slides look bad, okay? Visual clutter from too many colors. If you use too many colors, it's kind of hard to recognize what is important things and what are not important. And you should avoid capital letters. It's kind of hard to recognize, to read the text with the eyes, right? And pseudo 3D charts and graphs. 3D looks good. Good. It has a good looking charts, but in terms of interpretability, it's not good to interpret those charts and graphs. Okay. Again, flying objects should be avoided for your animation, but I'm not saying animation is bad. Sometimes animation is really helpful to catch up with what the speakers says. So use the animation wisely, and you should avoid the clip art that serves no purpose. So there's no, the clip arts is meaningless, then why would you include those clip arts, right? But it's a relative, it's related to what you want to say, then totally okay. If the fonts are too small to read, then that's really bad. And too many fonts in one single slide, that's bad too. And overuse of logos and borders, that's something also that you should avoid. The last thing, I would say the last but not least, the copyright is also important. You may want to include materials from others, right? So, and these materials, you should have the right to use. So I would say, in case of borrowing any material from elsewhere, then you should include the source in a slide. So for example, this is what I'm doing. So things to avoid, I borrowed this contents from this link, right? So tips, 10 minutes of scientific PowerPoint presentation, blah, blah, right? So you should always, so this is the lecture, so slightly different. So if you borrowed some contents from elsewhere, you should explicitly specify it. Otherwise, if you reuse the material without explicit notice, people may not appreciate your work. They're not appreciating your representation. Even worse, the issue of plagiarism would bother you later on. Okay. Often lecture slides are borrowed from others, then usually one includes the original author with a slide courtesy, which is what I did, right, in the first slides. So you should always keep an eye on the copyrights if you are borrowing some materials from others. Okay. All right. I think that's pretty much it for today, and thank you for your attention.